There was a time in Oakwood Heights, an apparently peaceful suburb where well-kept lawns and sun-dappled streets hide a dark secret. Maria, a bright 15-year-old girl with a calm manner, lives with her father, Willie. Outwardly, Willie appears as a loving and respected man in the community, known for his charitable deeds and friendly personality. However, behind the closed doors of their home, Willie's true nature is revealed. He is a controlling, abusive man who subjects Maria to unimaginable horrors. Maria's mother left the family when she was just 5, leaving her with memories of a warm presence that suddenly vanished, creating an emotional void. Willie's abuse began shortly after, escalating as Maria grew older. She lives in constant fear, her days filled with attempts to avoid her father's wrath, and her nights haunted by the trauma she endures. Despite her pain, Maria tries to maintain a facade of normalcy at school, concealing her bruises and scars, both visible and hidden from her friends and teachers. Maria's behavior begins to change. She withdraws from her friends, her grades start slipping, and she becomes a shadow of her former self. Mrs. Timmy, Maria's English teacher, notices these changes and grows concerned. Mrs. Timmy is an observant and empathetic woman who has seen signs of distress in students before. She reaches out to Maria, asking if everything is okay at home, but Maria brushes it off, too scared to reveal the truth. One evening, Maria stares at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, feeling trapped and powerless. She begins writing in a journal as a form of therapy, recording every abusive incident as a way to make sense of her situation. The journal becomes her only confidant, a place where she pours out her fears, pain, and hope that one day she will escape. Maria often dreams of running away, but her father's threats telling her that no one would believe her and that she would end up worse off keep her paralyzed with fear. One night, during a particularly violent episode, Maria secretly records her father's abuse on her phone. She hides the recording deep in her room, knowing that it could be her only proof if she ever found the courage to seek help. Maria's mental and emotional state continues to deteriorate. She suffers from anxiety and panic attacks, often triggered by sudden loud noises or reminders of her father's abuse. Despite her best efforts to keep her turmoil hidden, the cracks in her facade start showing. She frequently misses school, and when she does attend, she's distracted and distant, her mind trapped in the nightmare she calls home. Chi-Chi, Maria's best friend since childhood, notices that Maria has changed. Chi-Chi is lively, outspoken, and fiercely loyal, always ready to stand up for her friends. She tries to get Maria to talk about what's bothering her, but Maria keeps her distance, fearing that bringing Chi-Chi into her problems could put her at risk. Meanwhile, Willie grows increasingly paranoid, sensing that Maria might be slipping out of his control. He begins imposing stricter rules, monitoring her phone, and even following her to school under the guise of being a concerned parent. The abuse escalates as Willie's need for control intensifies, and Maria becomes more desperate to escape. One day, after a particularly brutal beating, Maria reaches her breaking point. With trembling hands, she confides in Chi-Chi, revealing everything about the abuse she has suffered at the hands of her father. Chi-Chi is horrified but determined to help her friend. Together, they hatch a plan to anonymously report Willie to Child Protective Services, CPS, hoping that the authorities will intervene. Maria and Chi-Chi make the call, their voices shaky as they relay the horrors that have been hidden behind the walls of Maria's home. The CPS agents visit, but Willie manages to charm his way out of suspicion, painting a picture of a misunderstood, struggling single father dealing with a difficult teenager. CPS leaves, unconvinced that anything is wrong. Maria is crushed, feeling like her one chance for freedom has slipped through her fingers. Despite the setback, Maria refuses to give up. She continues to document her abuse, secretly recording audio and video of Willie's outbursts. She feels like she's living in a constant state of alertness, always careful to hide her evidence from her father. The tension in the house is palpable, and every day feels like walking on a tightrope. Maria's mental state continues to decline. She begins having nightmares, often waking up screaming in the middle of the night, only to be scolded by Willie for disturbing his sleep. During the day, she's plagued by flashbacks, unable to focus on schoolwork or enjoy the things she once loved. Chi-Chi becomes her lifeline, offering comfort and encouragement, but Maria knows that only a drastic action can save her. Meanwhile, their new neighbor, Mrs. Ozier, moves in next door. A warm and intuitive woman, Mrs. Ozier quickly picks up on the strange dynamics of Maria's household. She often sees Maria through the kitchen window, looking distant and sad, and she hears the muffled arguments and loud crashes at night. She senses something isn't right but doesn't want to intrude too quickly. One evening, after hearing a particularly loud confrontation, Mrs. Ozier decides to introduce herself to Maria, hoping to offer some support. She knocks on the door and is greeted by Willie's charming smile, which quickly fades when he realizes she's there to talk to Maria. He coldly dismisses Mrs. Ozier, but she catches a glimpse of Maria's haunted eyes before the door closes. Maria's interaction with Mrs. Ozier gives her a flicker of hope that someone else might see through Willie's facade. Encouraged, she decides to take her evidence to the police. Late one night, she sneaks out with the USB drive containing the recordings and walks to the police station, her heart pounding with every step. She hesitates at the door, fearing the possible repercussions if Willie finds out. After several moments of battling her fear, Maria drops the USB drive in an anonymous evidence box and leaves, praying that it will be enough to finally bring her father to justice. The police receive the anonymous evidence and begin investigating quietly, careful not to alert Willie. Detective Oman, a seasoned officer with a deep sense of justice, takes on the case. He recognizes the signs of manipulation and abuse in the recordings and becomes determined to help Maria, seeing echoes of his own past in her situation. Detective Oman starts piecing together Maria's story, gathering more evidence and speaking discreetly to people in Maria's life, including Chi-Chi, Mrs. Timmy, and Mrs. Ozier. As the investigation progresses, Oman uncovers a history of financial discrepancies and previous allegations against Willie that were dismissed due to lack of evidence. Meanwhile, Willie becomes increasingly erratic, feeling the walls closing in. He suspects that someone has betrayed him but doesn't know who. One evening, Maria makes a mistake. She leaves her phone unlocked, and Willie finds one of the recordings. Enraged, he destroys the phone and confronts Maria, demanding to know who she's been talking to. The confrontation turns violent, and Maria's cries are loud enough for Mrs. Ozier to hear next door. Terrified for Maria's safety, Mrs. Ozier finally calls the police, reporting a suspected case of domestic violence. Officers arrive just in time to prevent Willie from causing further harm. Willie is arrested on the spot, and Maria, bruised but relieved, is taken to safety. It's the first time she feels a glimmer of hope that this nightmare might finally be over. Maria is placed in protective custody while the legal proceedings against Willie begin. The courtroom becomes a battleground where Maria's bravery and resilience are put to the test. Willie's defense team tries every trick to discredit her, painting her as a troubled, rebellious teenager looking for attention. The public is divided, with some unable to reconcile the charming community member they know with the monster Maria describes. Maria takes the stand, her hands trembling but her voice resolute. She recounts every painful detail, her words piercing through the courtroom as she faces her father with unwavering determination. The recordings play a crucial role, exposing Willie's abusive behavior for all to see. Mrs. Ozier, Mrs. Timmy, and Chi-Chi testify, providing additional support that reinforces Maria's account. The trial is long and grueling, with emotional highs and lows that test Maria's strength. She experiences moments of doubt, especially when Willie's lawyer twists her words and tries to undermine her credibility. But with the unwavering support of those who believe in her, Maria finds the courage to keep fighting. The jury's verdict is unanimous. Willie is found guilty of multiple charges, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. The sentence is severe, reflecting the gravity of his actions. Maria watches as her father is led away in handcuffs, finally feeling the weight of years of abuse lift from her shoulders. The victory is bittersweet. Maria is relieved but also grappling with the trauma she endured. The story captures her path to recovery, attending therapy, rebuilding her sense of self-worth, and finding solace in the support of those who stood by her side. She reconnects with her estranged mother, who returns after hearing about the trial, seeking to make amends and help Maria heal. As Maria tries to rebuild her life, she stumbles upon a box hidden in her father's old study. Inside, she finds letters, photographs, and legal documents that reveal shocking secrets about her family's past. Among the papers is evidence that Willie had a history of abuse dating back to his teenage years. He had been expelled from school for violent behavior, and there were police reports of domestic disturbances involving his own parents. One document stands out: a restraining order filed by Maria's mother, Gina, years ago. It becomes clear that Gina had tried to protect Maria, but Willie's threats and manipulations forced her into silence. Maria also discovers letters from her grandparents, who tried to intervene, but Willie had cut off all contact, isolating Gina and Maria from any outside help. Maria's anger boils over. She confronts Gina, demanding to know why she didn't fight harder. Gina breaks down, revealing a shocking twist. Willie had blackmailed her with false evidence of a crime she didn't commit, threatening to have her arrested if she ever left him. The realization that her mother was also a victim of Willie's abuse forces Maria to reevaluate her feelings of betrayal and resentment. Maria's blog attracts the attention of a private investigator named Doris, who contacts her with startling information. Doris had been hired by an anonymous source to dig into Willie's past, and what she uncovered is disturbing. Willie was connected to a network of abusers who protected each other from the law. They shared tips on how to evade police scrutiny, intimidate victims, and manipulate the legal system. Doris believes Willie's connections may have helped him get lenient sentences in the past, explaining why he was able to continue his abusive behavior for so long. Maria and Doris decide to work together to expose this network, determined to bring down not just Willie, but everyone involved. They begin collecting evidence, interviewing other victims, and building a case to present to the authorities. During their investigation, they discover that one of the men in the network is a respected community leader with ties to local law enforcement. This man has been covering up abuse cases for years, and Maria realizes that taking him down will be far more dangerous than she anticipated. As Maria and Doris dig deeper, they find themselves being watched. Maria receives anonymous threats, warning her to back off. One night, she notices a car following her home, and her apartment is broken into. It's clear that someone in the network is trying to intimidate her into silence. Despite the danger, Maria refuses to back down, but the fear begins to take its toll. Then comes the biggest twist. Maria learns that one of her closest allies, Mrs. Timmy, has been feeding information to the network. Mrs. Timmy's son was involved in illegal activities, and she was blackmailed into cooperating with the abusers to protect him. The betrayal devastates Maria, as Mrs. Timmy was one of the few people she trusted completely. Mrs. Timmy, racked with guilt, confesses everything to Maria. She explains that she never meant to hurt her but felt trapped by the network's threats. Maria is torn between anger and understanding, realizing that the cycle of manipulation extends far beyond her own family. Determined to end the network's reign of terror, Maria and Doris go undercover to gather evidence. They attend secret meetings disguised as potential recruits, recording conversations and taking photos. The deeper they go, the more they realize just how powerful and far-reaching the network's influence is. In one heart-stopping moment, Maria and Doris narrowly escape when their cover is blown at a meeting. They are chased through dark alleys, barely making it to safety. Maria's courage is tested like never before, but she refuses to let fear dictate her actions. She knows that if she doesn't take them down now, more lives will be ruined. With Doris's help, Maria compiles a comprehensive report and turns it over to the authorities. However, the corrupt leader within the police force tries to bury the evidence, and it seems like all their efforts might be in vain. Maria is devastated, but she refuses to give up. In a last-ditch effort, Maria decides to go public with the evidence, holding a press conference to expose the network's crimes. The media frenzy puts immense pressure on the authorities to act, and the corrupt leader is finally arrested along with several other key members. The network's influence begins to crumble, and Maria's bravery is hailed as the turning point that brought down a powerful ring of abusers. However, the victory is bittersweet. Maria learns that Willie's involvement in the network was deeper than she ever imagined. He wasn't just a participant. He was one of the masterminds, orchestrating the abuse of countless victims. This revelation shatters her, but it also solidifies her resolve. Willie's conviction is extended, ensuring that he will never harm anyone again. As the dust settles, Maria receives an anonymous letter from one of the victims she helped save. The letter thanks her for her courage and for giving a voice to those who couldn't speak up. It's a small but powerful reminder of why she fought so hard, and it helps her find peace in the chaos. Years later, Maria's advocacy work continues to grow. She becomes a public figure, speaking at national conferences and working with lawmakers to strengthen protections for abuse survivors. Her story is featured in documentaries, and she publishes a memoir that becomes a bestseller, inspiring countless people to speak out against abuse. Maria reconnects with her estranged grandparents, who are overjoyed to see her thriving. She also maintains a cautious but hopeful relationship with Gina, who continues to seek redemption for her past mistakes. Maria's life is far from perfect, but she's built a community of support and found a purpose that drives her forward. Despite everything, Maria never forgets the horrors she endured, but she's no longer defined by them. She's a fighter, a survivor, and a beacon of hope for those still trapped in darkness. With every speech, every blog post, and every conversation, Maria reclaims her voice, turning her pain into power.